I got one router jig I need to show you guys and two I need to build for my shop, so let's get to it and do these builds. The Wood Jigs 21 entry, hosted by James at Fixit Fingers. So I've finally taken the time to build a benchtop router plate. I often clamped down my router and just used it that way, which worked out great for the time being. But I decided it was time to make a router plate for my table. One awesome thing here is that I actually had extra base. This makes it super convenient to making it interchangeable, and all I have to do is actually just change the router itself. And I can keep the router base on the plate, which makes things a lot faster. So one thing here is I am tracing out the holes and just making sure that everything is aligned for when I screw in the base plate. This is an extremely simple jig, but quite useful, especially if you're doing a lot of routering. I figured also this is a lot safer than the previous way I was doing it. And I know there are so many different routers there and each person has a different style of router, but just use your base plate as a guide and everything else will be pretty much the same. So I'm really glad I picked up this track saw. It makes it super easy for clean cuts, and I'm cutting the hole for where the base plate will sit flush. I use the jigsaw to cut clean corners, but just take your time with it because sometimes it can bind, just like that. I'm using a 2x4 on the flat just to hold the other side of the base plate. This will give me ample space to put in the rare earth magnets. You'll see in a second here. A nice little dry fit just to make sure it fits great. Drilling out the hole for the opening. Just make sure you have your measurements right according to your base plate. Now I'm marking out the locations for my magnets. I figured using magnets would be a lot quicker than screwing and unscrewing all the time if I needed to, and would be easier access for me instead of having to bend down to insert my router. I used CA glue for these magnets and they worked out great. And I'm using 3/4 inch rare earth magnets. These magnets are surprisingly strong, and I do recommend them for holding power. Enough strength to keep it straight, but you can easily remove it with just one hand. And just like that, you have a benchtop router plate to insert your router, laminate trimmer, or whatever type of router device you have. Since this is my benchtop, I wanted to sand it down smooth just to make sure everything is level and things are flat. I also decided to do just a quick router fence. I figured eventually I will need one of these, so I may as well get to it and start building it. It's a super quick fence, just make sure it's square, and I was debating adding T-tracks on the end, but I decided to just keep it open and just clamp it down when I need to use this fence. I attach them all together with CA glue. It's nice and quick glue that I use often for shop projects. So I just made sure that it's the length of my bench so that I can clamp it on each end and just adjust the fence exactly where I need it. Now typically I won't use this often, but I figured since I'm making a router plate, I may as well make a router fence. I just took my oscillating saw to cut out the notch for it, and there you go. It is square, it is ready to be routed on. And here's a little teaser. And it is working awesome. This definitely is a lot safer than the way I used to clamp my router down to the table. I feel a lot more comfortable, and oftentimes when I'm using the router, I'm just softening the edges with a 1/4 round or half round. So this is exactly what I need for my shop. I know we'll be getting a lot of use out of this jig, So thanks, James, for the kick in the butt to making my shop a little bit more efficient. So my second jig is a mortising jig, aka the domino jig. I have an older video of this jig, and I've been using it for months now, and it is actually awesome. Super easy, super simple, and I mean one day I will eventually get a Festool domino, but right now it's not in the cards. So this is an awesome alternative for it. So these base plates, covers, are basically your guides to make sure that everything is aligned. I'm more or less going to demonstrate it for you, then tell you the exact details on it, just to give you guys ideas and what you can do, what you can improve, and ultimately decide on what you want out of this jig. So it's basically a mortising jig. It works out great. I use it for dominoes. I think the most important part is that little 1-inch hole so that you can see your marks on the pieces that you are using your router on. Typically I use a 1/4 inch bit. It works out great, and I'm sure you can adjust it to your needs. This jig is pretty simple and practical. Just make sure you have a plunge base because it basically mimics the domino itself and will be a lot more accurate with a plunge base. And this is what it looks like when it is dominoed, or aka mortised. Lines up good, and you could give it a little bit more wiggle room if you wanted to have it a little bit more of a loose tenon. And just like that, there is your mortising jig. And the last jig that I need in my shop is a track saw routering jig. I've been needing to dado in some boards, but I actually don't have a dado stack. So I decided to make a router guide for my track saw. Typically I often use 3/4 inch stock, so this will be perfect because I could use a 3/4 inch bit on my router and I know it'll be straight because it's on my track saw. So I measured the thicknesses of my track saw on which material I needed, and I actually had some extra scrap laying around my shop. It actually worked perfect and will give it a nice clean glide on my track saw. So right now I'm cutting everything oversized and making sure that everything slides in and fits nicely. This measurement here is the most important part because you want to make sure this is tight and it moves freely, but also not too loose. Basically, I'm going to be gluing this 1/2 inch piece on top on these boards that are flush with my track saw. This will make sure that it glides nice and smooth. I did the old Type Bond 3 glue trick with CA glue mix so that the CA glue clamps it down while the Type Bond glue sets nicely. And now for the last piece for the jig. This piece will be running along the track saw and sits flush with the track saw. And I actually made everything oversized because I will cut it at the miter saw to the exact size that I want. Again, depending on which router you have, just use your base plate as a guide to mark your holes. I'm using my plunge base for this, but you can use a fixed base or basically any base that you have on your router. There's a lot of drilling in this project, pre-drilling holes, countersinking holes, and even holes for the handle. But just take your time with it and make sure to wear a mask, because MDF sucks. This is going to be the handle for the track saw guide. I just needed a second hand, and this will be nice and easy to give consistent pressure on the track saw. Pre-drill some holes and the handle will be set. And the final part is drilling out the hole for your base plate. Nice and smooth. Time to test it out. I really know exactly where I need to put my dust collector. And the fit is amazing. You can always adjust it with your track by just sliding your track a hair over, but overall I am extremely happy with this. And there you have it, 3 awesome router jigs that are easy to build and would most likely get some good use in your shop. Thanks for the challenge, James from Fixit Fingers, and to all the Aussie makers out there, I'd hate to miss these fun challenges. And we'll catch you at the next one.